Welcome to Conversations with CSG, the global talent podcast from CSG Talent. We interview influential figures across a wide range of innovative and impactful industry sectors worldwide, discussing career journeys, overcoming challenge, achieving success, diversity, and much more. I'm sure you'll see value in a lot of the topics we cover. So here it is. Hope you enjoy.
So today we are joined by Sussanah Osborne, Vice President of Productivity LATAC at Newmont. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're most welcome. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. So keen to discuss your career and I suppose delve straight into it. You've had such a vast experience across a diversity of companies within the mining industry. And, looking at your academic journey, you obviously started with geology and mining engineering. Did you always have a career path that in mind to go into the mining industry at your early stages of your academic journey?
I didn't actually. I come from a very long line of school teachers. And I grew up in a very small part of Australia, or South Australia, and there mining wasn't even a thing. I didn't actually even know about mining as a career option as I was starting to decide what I was going to study. It wasn't until I did a student exchange to Colombia, which was and actually my first time on a plane. So when I was 17, my first plane trip was over to Colombia in South America on a student exchange. And that was kind of what made me go, look, I really want a career where I can travel around and have adventure as the core essence of my career. And I always knew I was going to go into science or engineering, something like that. That was where my passion lay. But yeah, in terms of mining itself, I didn't make that decision until I sort of stumbled across it at that point in time.
And
so
how old were you then?
I was 17.
17, and your first trip was to Colombia. That's a big move for a teenager.
Exactly, especially when halfway along there, they're like, that family that we told you were going to be living with, actually, you're not going to now. So we're going to try and find your family when you get there for the next year.
Couch surfing.
This was pre-internet and communications with parents and things. So it was definitely a quick
big
lesson
move.
in resilience.
Yeah, big move. And so would you say that's where your passion and your interest, I suppose, originated from then, that trip to Colombia?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, not so much about mining per se, but that real desire to want to have a career where I could travel around and experience cultures and have a career path that provided that. But then, of course, as I got into mining and as I started to get more experience through work placements throughout my course and things like that, it just really resonated with me in terms of, some fantastic opportunities that were really providing things like that.
Brilliant. And I suppose that's where it all started in terms of travel as well then, because I was about to say, you've worked across numerous locations, Australia, New Zealand, Latin America, Singapore, Europe. How valuable do you think that diverse, in terms of the diverse experience and the opportunity that's provided, how valuable has that been in terms of working different geographies to your development?
It's a great question. And I think, like you say, my career path has certainly been non-traditional. And when I look at some of the peers that I work with, they've certainly done much more traditional, worked at a mining operation, progressed up through the ranks, maybe have changed a few different operations. So mine provides a really broad perspective and a really broad experience. So I'm able to leverage, if I talk just purely technically, on all of those different experiences across the different commodities, across the different open cut, underground, also quarries and construction as an area that I've worked at. So from a technical perspective, it certainly brings in a different visualization of what could be possible or how do we leverage from different areas. So that's one thing purely from a technical aspect. But then the real strength, I think, of experiencing different companies and different cultures is not only that, how do I work with different companies and cultures, which of course is really important for career progression, especially as you become more senior within organisations, but also what are the bits that I can learn or bring from one organisation into another, especially as they're at different parts of their journeys to more mature or more agile organisations.
Absolutely.
So definitely that experience, that diversity experience adds a lot of
sharing of best practice and working from all sides as well. It's not just, you've not just had one exposure, you've been on both sides of the cell and
so from a technical side, so back in the Orica days, the very early Orica days, I remember being there and it's like, Orica, this is what we do. We optimise, drill and blast. I'm really passionate about this. And sometimes that lack of acceptance around, well, we know best, versus when you go into being a part of an operation or being part of an organisation, the complexity of trying to be able to say, hey, we're not the best at everything. Maybe we draw from some of these suppliers. And of course, supply chain was a fantastic opportunity to really learn procurement and strategy and negotiation, and how do we think about challenges from different perspectives and align on what is the best outcome for everybody, so that we all come away with a solution that works and we're all happy with and enthusiastic, and your parties sort of come away going, hey, I've been beaten up in that. So lots of differences and can really contribute.
And I think there's not many people that in their careers can have that all-round experience of working in different areas of the business as well, which will have really kind of added to your development too, from what you've just said. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. And so I suppose that's meant a lot of relocating as well on a global scale.
It has. It has.
Which, I mean, when you've gone to Columbia at 17, maybe not so daunting, but how have you found those transitions?
I would be lying if I said that they're always easy. I think, with every change, there comes challenges, both personally and professionally. There's learning new organisations or learning new teams to different parts of the organisations. And there's that establishing of a network and, focusing. I know we talk a lot about your personal health as well now these days, which is fantastic. When I first started doing this, and especially in a very male-dominated industry, we didn't speak so much about that. So really starting to understand yourself and how do I make sure that I've got whole wellness is something that I learned along the way. But that there has been sometimes that have been easier, sometimes that have been harder, but finding those things that are really important in terms of establishing yourself as an individual, making sure that the family's established is really important. So I think that's something that I've grown and developed with. Certainly my most recent relocation back into Chile was hard because that was completely in Spanish. So when you put the complexity of, new country, new job, new role, and then throw language over the top of that, that was, another challenge to overcome. But certainly my Spanish got a whole lot better because of that.
Brilliant. Good to hear. And I suppose, what advice would you give to anyone that was either in process or thinking about a relocation?
Yeah, I think going eyes wide open. So if you are going to do a relocation, and I absolutely think it's fantastic, but understand it's almost like a relationship in some ways that, there's that honeymoon period when things are fantastic, it's all new and all exciting. And that might be the first 3 or 6 months or so. But after that, people get used to you get used to the location, and all that excitement starts to become normality, and this is the way things are. So it's really important that when you get to that point, you recognise that point for what it is, and that it's not the world's going bad. It's just, things have started to settle down and become your new normal. So it's really important at that point in time that by then you sort of found that 1 or 2 people that I like to call it the safe space, that you could just talk freely or talk about the frustrations, so that you have that person that you can just unload to, because you really do need that.
Yeah.
And then,
I was just about to add on, with technology nowadays, I think it's easier to have, video calls and the technology you can use to keep in touch with home and those home comforts. But I think it's the same as Teams meetings, that personal interaction, that physical interaction is really important for any relationship.
Absolutely. And I guess that was probably my second point is, make sure you've got those 1 or 2 people, but make sure they're actually in the country where you're living or in the location where you're living, as much as possible. And to do that, you've got to be proactive. We sort of say, we say yes to everything. And you go through a lot of, no, this isn't quite right, whether it be the activity, whether it be the relationship. But through that process, you're meeting your tribe or those people that you can really gel with. And I think the more, like I remember living in Mongolia, and some places have got this built-in expat community, and then other places there's lots of expats, but maybe the community's a little bit more dispersed because, Singapore's like that, where I used to call it the class of. We all sort of gravitated around people that had arrived within, 6 months of each other's. So
Brilliant.
Be proactive in looking after your own health.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched upon it earlier. Obviously, mining is still a huge male-dominated industry. with them representing sort of 80 to 85% of the workforce. What challenges, do you think still face women in the industry?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly doing this now. It's probably even more interesting in terms of where things will go. So certainly if I reflect on my career, in terms of what has changed up until now. When I first arrived, I was the only female in most of the rooms that I was in, and I started in explosives. I used to do a presentation where I talked from loneliness to loneliness, and I had a photo of myself. I worked for two different explosives companies about 15 years apart, and it was just me and a sea of men in both of these photos, even though it had been 15 years. So I think certainly we're changing. Certainly we see much greater representation of women in the industry, and also acceptance of people of any sort of minority, whether it be LGBTQIT plus or things like that. I am a little bit concerned that we're going to be stepping back from some of that. So that's a big concern of maybe where we do go. And the concern for that is because having gone through that journey and having led large organisations at a senior level, you can see the benefit that diversity brings.
Absolutely.
To the operation, to the culture. And even when you're talking to the men, it's like, it's just such a nice place to be. And I don't mean nice, hugs and kisses, type stuff. I mean nice as in, they can actually be their authentic self as well.
Absolutely.
So it brings a lot of positives to everyone.
Yeah. A lot more diversity.
Positive momentum, and depending on where you work in the world, there's organisations. The progression is at different stages. So certainly in Latino countries, I came across a LinkedIn profile where I was called out for being one of the first general managers in Chile, and this was only 2 years ago. So I think they spoke about 3 or 4 of us. So in some countries, the acceptance of women in senior leadership roles is not as progressed and not as common.
No, I think with the movement of women in mining and being truly led in every country, I think hopefully that should help push, and just in terms of like mentorship as well, just to know that it can be achieved. Do you think that it's presented any barriers for you in terms of your career progression? Or have you experienced kind of any barriers?
Yes, of course. I'd be lying if I said no. I think there's definitely women's behaviour is interpreted differently by anybody, whether it be male or female, than the same behaviours from a man. And that creates an emotional load or a cognitive load in terms of the way you present yourself, the way that you engage, the expectations. I was laughing with a colleague of mine a few weeks ago. We were at a conference, and we've both got about 20 plus years in the industry, and we were both new to the organisation, and she made the comment about, it's like I've spent the last 20 years in the kitchen. So there still is that unintentional barrier, but this expectation that my experience is not as, I often get people say to me, you need to go and get some operational experience. I've been in this industry now for over 20 years. I'm pretty sure I've ticked that box.
Yeah, I've got that one covered.
Yeah, it's funny, the interpretation of but you haven't done this one thing. So, but hang on, if we look at this person, they also haven't done this one thing. But we're still seeing it. We definitely still see it, and I think a lot of that is about getting people to put themselves in the shoes of others and really understand, well, what have been those challenges and those barriers that this person has faced that probably I haven't, through the privilege of my, whether it be gender or skin colour.
Do you think it's spoken about enough, though, the barriers? Do you think men maybe understand what barriers that you've had to face?
No, I don't think so. Or maybe we do talk about it a lot, but it's maybe not the people that are talking about it that are the ones that actually need to start to reflect. And I think it's very difficult to really have lived that, understand that experience unless you've lived that experience. And I liken it to safety. So, when we see operators or when we see mechanics or electricians that have had that really close near miss where would it not have been for just something not going quite this way, the outcome would have been very different. Until many of our team members have had that experience, they really don't experience or understand just how close it could have been. And I think for a lot of the people that I've spoken to, and of course most of those have been men, they don't really get it
Yeah.
until they've been able to have some sort of similar or some sort of aha moment.
Yeah.
And I
And
know
I suppose that, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, and you know, the closest that I've been able to do with that is two occasions. My husband was at home with the children ever since we had children. And so it was likening the felt experience of a woman in the workplace. And when I say, you know, in my kind of workplace where there's lots of guys and, you know, the talk and the conversation, and it was like his experience or helping them to imagine what his experience is in the mothers groups. You know, he's not going to talk about breastfeeding. He's not going to, you know, so by default, the difference creates exclusion and not intentionally, but
Yeah. Yeah. I was just, I suppose, adding on to that and saying, actually, you could put that across anything in life. Until you've truly been through something yourself, you can't honestly say, I understand what you're going through, and put yourself on the same level. What do you
to
think?
answer your question though,
Yeah.
we do need to talk about it, but I guess I'd really love to see the evolution of the conversation to be more about the understanding and, well, hang on, I haven't had this felt and lived experience. And I was talking to a black guy yesterday, and a few weeks ago, and he was talking about he was in a predominantly white neighbourhood for a dinner party with a friend of his, and she'd run out, and that sense of dread that, you know, the fear that just purely comes from how he's been socially conditioned and the experiences that he's had in life that have led him to be concerned in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think the industry needs to do to increase the representation of women within mining?
Great question. I think continuation with many of the things that we are doing. I think it's probably a little bit more. So when I say that, access pathways, so that we start to broaden out, or we put in place the checks and balances to ensure that we're actually looking at a broad group of people, and that we're saying, you know, we want to have representation, at least get to the interviewing process. And then when we've got to the interviewing process, what are those checks and balances to make sure that we're removing bias from the systems? So we're not discriminating against the way that somebody speaks or the way that they present, just purely based on some pieces that really are not so relevant to the role as well. So more continuation of that. I'd really like to see us stop talking about, you know, women's leadership or, you know, women's quotas or things like that. And, you know, I'll tongue in cheek sometimes say, you know, our male representation is this. Because the more that we talk about women, the more it's women's problems. So the more we talk about society and the impact, you know, are we in parity? Do we have a good representation of the workforce that represents society in all of its types? So we can start to change our language a little bit to be more proactive. And then I think, you know, the systems that continue with some of those stereotypes or those societal expectations. So a lot of companies, you know, we have maternity leave as opposed to parental leave. So, you know, there's typically two parents in a relationship, but by continuing to say, well, mum gets, you know, whether it be where I am currently in the US, a couple of days or a week to 9 months, but dad or the partner who didn't birth the child doesn't have that equal responsibility. So that also means that, you know, we're putting in place systems and structures that are by default biased towards the continuation of a society that penalises women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that crosses multiple industries as well. I know some of the things you're speaking about, especially processes as well. We have to think about that every day within recruitment. How are we writing our adverts? We get, you know, we've got multiple bits of training on it as well as how we write them. What are our interview questions? Is it really leading everyone to think that they can apply for the role? So, and it's something we coach actually a lot of our clients on from a consultancy basis. You know, that guiding you on how your processes should look, and like you say, your interview stages as well. So, I think everyone has a part to play in it, don't they?
Absolutely. And also I think too, what are skill sets that are transferable as well? So often, you know, and I share with you the experience of being told I need to get more operational experience, but that's because, and inherently we do it. We are social beings. And if you look like me and you walk like me and you talk like me, I'm going to think you're, you know, a great bloke or a great girl, and I'm going to want to associate with you. It doesn't necessarily mean that my experience is the right experience for the role, or the experience of somebody else's career path is a little bit different. wouldn't actually work equally as well, and in many cases a lot better because of that breadth of experience that they have. But we do find ourselves very trapped into the, no, I've got to tick this box and this box and this box. And back to when you asked me earlier, that definitely works against women because, firstly, women they get penalised much more for a lack of experience than what a male would as well. So we have to really challenge ourselves about, well, what are the skill sets that we're looking for and how would you apply those skill sets?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've obviously held numerous management leadership roles. What traits do you think that somebody needs in order to be a great leader?
I think the most important one is empathy to start with. So I think too often we try to look at the world in black and white terms and, in the absolute of the moment without taking in consideration everything that makes up that person or makes up that team. And that right from, what their experiences are, whether it be from childhood or other things that have developed them into the person that they are. And that's not just within their development, but also in the workplace culture that we have. So being able to look at the grey in situations, and I think you can only do that with empathy and being really curious to understand the different perspectives. So that's absolutely important because that's what gets the best out of people. So, we're very quick to say, well, we've got to hold people to account, but not so quick at saying, well, let's look in the mirror and see what is it that we're doing as a leadership team to ensure that we're enabling people to operate at their best. So for me, I encompass that in empathy, but also in that real curiosity to seek to understand. So learning to try and see it from a different perspective, or what do we put in place? So looking at ourselves first as leaders rather than looking at the individual first. And it's, the mining industry has had a real challenge since COVID really about trying to get people into the industry and the skill level, not the skill level necessarily, but the experience level might have dropped.
Yeah.
And so we're pretty quick to say, well, we've got to go back to the good old days and, yell and scream and hold people to account. And it's like, well, we could. The alternative way to do that is we could actually think, well, what are the systems? What are the processes in place that are really, and those behaviours that are driving the culture?
And I think it's understanding that actually by having that approach, you're going to keep people, they're going to, like you say, they want to work for you. They want to be within your team. But yeah, you'll have people whose longevity within companies is so much bigger because of that. So much longer.
And the performance of the organisation is so much better as well because people feel safe to speak up. And I'm just reflecting on my previous role where, our operation had been running for 20 years and not once had we hit, I think maybe once we'd hit the budget for the year. And then in the time that I was there, and not because I knew, oh no, we've got to do this, we've got to fix this, but because we worked it as a team and we'd created the environment where we could work as a team, not just from the general manager, but down to the manager, down to the superintendents, down to the team members, so that everybody felt valued. And then we could talk about and really, so it wasn't just tell me what to do and I'll do that. And we hit and we exceeded safety targets, production targets, cost targets, which was the first time that had happened in the 20-year life of the operation.
True collaboration.
And not because I'm a brilliant leader necessarily, but because we could actually all work together and start to think about what are the challenges, what can we do? How do we
and getting that input in that as well, isn't it? Making them feel valued.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So you touched upon skills actually. What skills do you see in demand in the industry at the moment?
Definitely for us at the moment, it is technical skills. So we are seeing, people, and I've got a 13-year-old son. I understand it. He had a 10-year-old daughter as well, though she's going to be a singer. So I don't know. Not sure.
You never know.
Never know.
She might go to Columbia and change her mind.
Well, that's true. My kids have lived around the world, so many locations. I'm fearful that they're going to get to 18 and say, well, that's enough. We're never moving again. Anyway, I'm sure that won't happen. But certainly, the sexy industries is what is attracting the younger workforce. But so we definitely need those technical skills. And I'm a really big advocate of somebody who may have done a trade first, so an electrician, for example, then going into electrical engineering or mechanical engineering or something like that, because you can continue to evolve and develop around that. So I don't think we have to put ourselves into a box and say, hey, no, I'm only ever a tradesperson. I couldn't do that. I think we learn a lot and grow a lot as long as we're open to that. So, but those really deep technical skills and when I speak with younger graduates, they all want to rush through every stage. and I was exactly the same, so I get it. But really consolidating some of those technical capabilities, understanding what it means, how it all comes together. And also, I think, understanding that there is a really rich career path too, in a technical career path as well. And that is an option, becoming subject matter experts in whether it be processing or geotechnical or those kinds of things. But yeah, definitely the technical side of things is a gap.
And I know we've always talked about considering people from different industries, and we touched on transferable skills earlier. Do you think that companies are genuinely ready to accept people from different industries? And, they might not be mining engineers or have worked in an operation, but their skill sets are still transferable and valid. Do you think companies are generally, at the moment, ready to accept that as a skill set?
Yeah. Look, I'd love to say that we are. I don't think we are. I think it's funny, I was on an innovation forum just earlier this week, and I think compared to other industries, probably not as much.
Yeah.
Although that said, one of my best mechanical engineers / managers had come from the aviation industry, and she had a very broad background in aviation, so nothing connected to mining whatsoever, but her critical thinking. So the skills, when we talk about transferable skills, what is her critical thinking? What is her ability to be able to learn and take in complex bits of information and be able to evolve and put that into something that makes sense for herself and for the team in terms of the way forward? And then some of the contextual stuff around specific to mining, that can come with time. So those pieces we can learn. But that capability to critically think and operate in complexity, that crosses the industry. So I think that's what we need to be looking for, not, have I spent plenty of time in mobile fleet or asset management, whatever the case might be, because at the end of the day, it is very similar, but my ability to be able to think about what those challenges is what matters most.
Yeah, we are noticing it more and more, oil and gas, because it's kind of a scale down from that, and that's the only piece they need to learn. And even just heavy industries, industrial automation. Yeah, we are seeing more and more of people transferring over, which it's nice to see, and hopefully there'll be more of it. And hopefully with that as well, that might attract more females as well. You never know. I mean, have you ever, or are you part of kind of mentorships?
Yes. Yeah. So I always participate as a mentor, and it's a really valuable, it gives just as much to me as what it does to the individual. And I'm really fortunate too that I'm able to do that across multiple countries as well. So
brilliant.
With a mix of people as well. So I've done that for many, many years now, and watching their careers flourish. Or I love it when I get the note that says, at the time, you were talking about this, and now I've experienced that. I really get where you were coming from. So brilliant. If you are a mentee, when some of those conversations come back, getting those little notes every now and again is lovely as well, because it really fills you with energy.
And how did you get into that? Is it been more through company programs, or you approaching schools, universities?
A combination. Actually, we spoke about, being footloose and fancy free and heading over to Columbia and things a little bit. And I actually set up a mentoring program when I was at university for students and industry professionals as a part of the OSIM chapter as well. It's something I've always been interested, because I'm always interested. I'm very curious. I'm very curious about whatever it might be. So having that as accesses and opportunities, and from that, organic almost in many ways, because it's, would you mentor me? And it might be 1 or 2 sessions that you get together or over a cup of coffee, versus more formal programs such as the program or in schools and things like that. So a combination of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are noticing it more and more. And like you say, having that feedback as to how that bit of advice has got them further in their careers, I imagine is good for both sides as well. A point, an aha moment, but also, good to know that, your efforts haven't gone.
Well, I think also as a mentor, you feel a bit overwhelmed, because you go, I don't know if I know it all. I'm just sharing with you my experience. So sometimes you feel a little bit like I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. So when it's, because we're all a little bit insecure sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We're sharing our experiences.
And this is a question that we ask everyone on our podcast. What is the best bit of advice that you've had in your career?
Okay. I got this question ahead of time, so I had the benefit of thinking about that, which I very much appreciate, because there's been lots of great advice, but there's probably one bit that I come back to, and that was very early on. It was actually just before I started my career when I was in university, and I had a lecturer who I was at a awards presentation where I was receiving an award, and my father was an alcoholic. And, and when you're in front of peers and people that, you want to show your best at, there's always a little bit of fear, trepidation. And he said to me, never be ashamed of where you've come from, because that's what's made you and that's what's given you this depth of experience. So
Yeah.
that was really good, because I think, we spoke a little bit about imposter syndrome. Sometimes, and especially in some of our industries, you haven't gone to the right school, or you haven't got the right background, the right connections. That can be a little bit daunting and overwhelming. So him saying that, and that was somebody that I really valued his opinion, really helped me to say, be your authentic self, be honest about who you are and the experiences. So, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. I know that's something, if I was to think about it for myself, I was probably even younger where my mum said something similar. I was always told I was bossy. And at school, it was always the feedback. And I remember my mum saying to me, she said, Christina, one day that'll be management, it'll be leadership. And don't let them put you down. And I certainly didn't. Not with my brothers anyway. I'm sure they can contest. But yeah, just having someone say it's, the same thing, be yourself. All you can be is true to who you are.
Yeah. And I think, to your, we were just talking about it, actually. Somebody called me bossy the other day. I'm like, a parent one said, would you have said that if it was a male? So this, women are bossy, but men are leadership. So it's funny how, some of those things, or tomboy is the one that I really hate. What makes me a boy, just because I like running around and being outside. Bossy is, so often reserved just for women, as opposed to,
Yeah. I mean, I'll own it. I am.
Yeah. Good for you.
I'll own it. But yeah, it's been really good speaking to you. And thank you so much for joining the podcast, Sussanah. Great to finally meet.
Absolutely. I've had a great time. Thank you so much for the invite.
Excellent.
That was Conversations with CSG. I'm sure many professionals will relate and see value in the insights shared. Stay tuned for further insights from industry-leading professionals on our podcast, Conversations with CSG. Thanks for listening.